The February 9th regular meeting of the Fairfield Board of Education is called to order. I am the chair, Christine Vitale, and I'm joined tonight by Ms. Rotelli, Mrs. Jacobson, Ms. Pitko, Mrs. Gerber, Mrs. Maxicannelli, Mr. Peterson, Mrs. Guernsey. Mr. Asa will be joining us shortly. He's not on yet, and Superintendent Cummings as well as our executive directors. I would ask you all to please rise and then remain standing after the pledge. As you all know, we lost a member of our school community over the past week. We are all grieving and just ask that you please just remain standing for a moment of reflection. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. And to the public, thank you for joining us tonight. I'm sorry that we had to switch the mechanism of which we are live streaming out. The weather and the early close just changed our plans, but thankfully we are still able to gather and have this meeting tonight. We will go to call in public comment right now. And the first caller, we have phone number ending 7094.
Susan is not on the call currently.
Okay, we will go to the next caller. Caller ending 5587, Rebecca.
Hi there. This is Rebecca Kern, 430 Vernon Hill Road. I'm calling to discuss the Math Academy, which was a topic of discussion for the last meeting. I know I've communicated with all of you today, but I'm very surprised that we're back here once again to discuss the Math Academy. What I want to say is that the Math Academy was not on the agenda, and it feels that this was being done under the radar, which after all that we discussed last year does not feel right. The Math Academy has been life-changing, not only academically, but emotionally. It has enriched our children's mental health as well. They have learning differences too. However, these learning differences go unnoticed because they're high achievers. I will just leave with this. I will lead with this. The decision to participate has been life-changing for Baylor. She is finally being challenged. And until you all have figured out how to support these types of children, please don't take away their happiness for a small line item comparative to other less profound issues. And that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Ms. Kern, for your comment. Next caller, ending in 2448.
This individual is not on the call.
Okay. Next caller, ending in 0097.
This individual is also not on the call.
Next caller, ending in 3051.
Hi, this is Marie Rotundo. I'm calling about the Math Academy. It is a program that is one example of Fairfield Public School District's excellence in identifying and serving gifted children. The children are working alongside similar-minded peers, which elevates the level of learning for the group. They have the ability to move their skills forward faster, which keeps them engaged and challenged in this program rather than bored. All qualifying children should have the opportunity to learn in the same manner even if it means a lottery. Offering additional math and science services at each elementary school does not replicate the gifted peer interaction or curriculum of the program. Those services may help fill a void for families for qualifying children that stay within their district or home school. However, the Math Academy at Holland Hill serves a purpose to families that believe their children need the elevation in curriculum and peer interaction the program uniquely provides. The program as it stands is thriving and interest is growing. Terminating the Math Academy, a successful, unique program, is a disservice to Fairfield's children and a loss for our town. Thank you.
Thank you for those comments. Next caller ending in 6559.
This individual's not on the call.
Thank you. And I believe there's another caller that called in. I don't have them on my list.
Yes, we have a Jessica Madison ending in 3398. They are not on the call currently. And we have one other individual, Elizabeth Schneider, ending in 6559. They are also not on the call.
Okay. All right.
But we did just get caller number 3. Just
Okay.
called in just now. If you'd like me to switch to them.
Yes, please. Please just state your name and address for the record.
Am I online?
We can hear you, yes.
Oh, hi, my name is Anjali Sharma, and my address is 520 Queens Grant Road, Fairfield.
You may give public comment. Thank you for calling in.
Sure, I'm calling regarding the board's decision on canceling the Math Academy program. And when I say this on behalf of all the parents and students who are currently enrolled in that program, and including the teachers and principal of Holland Hill, on how impactful this program has been and how significantly this program has made difference on the students that are currently enrolled in their lives. It's only fair for these kids who tend to learn on a faster pace to be grouped with their peers versus bringing a big group of class where, different of pace. It's unfair to the home teachers where they have to, kind of manage their pace based on the other kids. I mean, my daughter went to, her home school and sat out most of the time in the hallway reading books just because she was caught up or, helping her teacher out, which was great. But I think those kids who need more attention and needs that undivided attention for their teachers, and the kids who tend to learn on a faster pace needs that accelerated program. It's been a great program that, Fairfield Public School System has started. It has been very successful. It's gaining a lot of popularity. We're hoping that the Board of Education would do something to expand that program to reach out more students and definitely not cancel. It's going to be a very disappointing move, and we're really hoping that you would consider all the letters and comments and the students writing in, calling in, sending videos, and really make that consideration before you decide to cancel this program. We really appeal to the board and to the superintendent to really consider and keep this program ongoing, and we as parents and families are willing to support in whichever way we can to move this program forward. Thank you.
Thank you for those comments. And just for the public, typically the board receives public comment on agenda items only. We did take comments tonight on the Math Academy, even though that wasn't on the agenda, just because we have had a lot of switches in our agenda and our meeting format over the last few weeks, and I do appreciate that it has been more difficult for the public to access our meetings, being that we have been virtually. But just for the public moving forward, I think that's just an important reminder. Also, for anybody who is listening and would still like to give comment, we're not taking any more call-in public comment, but you can send public comment via the form on the Board of Ed website. The form is posted with this meeting's agenda, as well as emailing to publiccomment@fairfieldschools.org. Thank you. Thank you to those callers who did call in. Moving on to new business, first reading of proposed AP Physics C text, Physics for Scientists and Engineers, a Strategic Approach with Modern Physics, 4th edition, 2017. Mr. Cummings, would you?
Good evening, everyone. Mike Cummings, Superintendent. I'm going to ask Dr. Savajancic if you could introduce Ms. LaSala, who's going to present the AP Physics textbook for the board's consideration.
Good evening, everybody. James Savajancic, Executive Director of Instruction, Curriculum, and Assessment. This evening, I'm joined by Ms. LaSala, who is our Program Director of Science in STEAM. 612 for science. Recently, the AP course in physics was approved for the high school course of study. And tonight we bring to you the textbook that has been decided by the department and the committees for that course. One reminder that I'll give to the group that we spoke about in a prior meeting was this was part of the current budgeted year versus next year, which I'm sure Ms. LaSala may touch on as well. Ultimately, this textbook has gone through a number of committees, which Ms. LaSala will talk about, including teachers and parents. So without further ado, I'll leave it to Ms. LaSala to present the textbook to you for your consideration. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, sorry.
Nope, go ahead.
Hi, good evening. This is Justine LaSala. I'm the Supervisor of Secondary Science and K-12 STEAM. Thank you for the opportunity to present to you a proposal for our textbook for our new AP Physics C course. I am going to share my screen to show you a couple of slides.
And for the public that is listening, these slides are posted with the board's agenda, if you would like to follow along. If you're listening in and not viewing on TV.
All right. I need the other screen. There we go. Try that again. Okay. Sorry, I have to move that box. Okay. Here we go. So the text that we are proposing is Randall Knight's Physics for Scientists and Engineers, an Approach with Modern Physics, and the publisher is Pearson. The text also includes a digital subscription to a product called Mastering Physics, which is an adaptive online tutoring system that supports student learning in a personalized way. As far as the selection process, we began with a review of the list of acceptable texts from the College Board, and we also engaged in discussions with other teachers in the AP Physics C teacher community. We looked through the possible texts, and the Physics C Textbook Review Committee, which was comprised of our own physics teachers, narrowed down the options to two texts, the Knight text and the Giancoli text. And both of these are Pearson products. And a large appeal of the Pearson product is the opportunity to partner the text with Mastering Physics. Mastering Physics is a great product that has shown to really support student learning and provides a personalized approach for students in order to practice. Ultimately, the physics teachers on the review committee decided on the Knight text for the following reasons: the quality and factual content and presentation, the validity and appropriateness to prepare students for the exams, and as well as recommendations from other AP Physics C teachers. We then created a review form, and we sent information out to the community to do a review of the text with a survey. We had 14 responses for that survey. The survey results were overwhelmingly positive as far as those that reviewed it and felt that it was appropriate for a calculus-based physics course. The other thing that I want to mention, though, too, is that the textbook is just one tool. The textbook's not necessarily our curriculum, but it is a resource that we use to support student learning. We have other tools that we plan on using to support students. And they include resources provided by College Board. They provide great tutorials for free for students. MIT also has an open courseware calculus-based physics course that provides lectures and notes and problem sets for students. And then we also use virtual simulations from, it's called PhET simulations from the University of Colorado. And another tool called Pivot Interactives, which uses interactive videos for lab instruction. So taking all of that combined, all of these things will be used as resources to support students in their learning. If anybody has any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. I'm going to stop sharing. Okay.
Take it to the board. Does anybody have any questions about the text? Mrs. Maxon-Kennelly? No, we can't hear you.
Okay, yeah, I was not co-hosted, so I couldn't unmute myself. Thank you. One question kind of goes to the course and the text. Do you anticipate that this will be here in time to be handed out in June, and will it become part of any summer requirement work?
Yes, we can order it now. As Dr. Zavojanic mentioned, we have it in our budget for this year. So once it's approved, we can order it right away. And we also have it includes a digital version with it. So I can't guarantee for sure, but I'm assuming that with the summer assignment, the teachers would probably include some work connected to the text.
Okay, I'm not necessarily advocating for that. I was just wondering if that was what the timing was planned. The 174 for the text, is there this digital subscription to Mastering Physics? Does that come with a cost? And I assume that that would be an ongoing cost.
Yeah, that's included with the cost of the text. It's a 6-year license.
And that's covered in the 174.
That's correct.
Okay. And I was wondering how you envision the teachers using the personalized learning experience and how it has demonstrated positive impact.
So I know that we have, with our AP chemistry text, the teachers use the Mastering Chemistry tool, and they find it just a really great resource for students, because students can basically, they can take practice tests and quizzes, and then they'll get targeted instruction based on their responses to those tests and quizzes. So they can kind of, they can drive their own personalized learning experience for what they need to practice.
That sounds excellent. And then I only had one other question. The additional instructional supports for students, do those come with any budget implications?
Nope, all of those things are well, all of them are free. The Pivot Interactives product is something that we bought this year to support all the AP sciences, but it's really not expensive at all.
Okay, thank you so much.
Any other questions? Seeing none. If anybody wanted to review these texts or look at them, are they available at central office?
Yeah, I have hard copy covers in my office. And again, if anybody's interested, you know, if I have their email, I could also send them the digital review copy, as well as the survey, if additional people wanted to take a look and participate in that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. No other questions? Thank you, Ms. LaSala.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on to first reading of policies. Policy 2133, Administration, Headmasters, and Principals. Policy 2133.11, Administration, Housemaster, and Assistant Principals. Policy 1100, Community Relations, Communication with the Public. Mrs. Maxon Cannelli, do you have any information for the board on this?
The first two I think should be relatively self-explanatory. They are just reflecting making the policy in line with the title changes that we have already taken effect. So that's all that was going on there. The third one was a topic that came up in policy committee, the communication with the public, that we thought needed to be more explicit. And so in terms of, as we obviously, especially in the current situation with different models, different instruction, questions about curriculum, and we just thought it was an important sentence to add regarding adding some parameters for how communication should be happening in the district. And I'd be happy to take questions now or at any point before the next meeting when we vote.
Does anybody have any questions for Mrs. Maxon Cannelli or the policy committee? Was there any debate about this that we should be taken into consideration about any of these policies? Or
the first two, definitely not. The third one, we did some wordsmithing on, but no, it was fine with staff and nothing very controversial. We just, the communication of this to staff and public is obviously the important part of this policy having any potency to it. But no, nothing that was controversial.
Thank you. And I thank the, any questions or comments for Mrs. Maxon Cannelli? Seeing none, I thank the policy committee for taking this up. I do think it's important that communication be clear and coming out of central office from Mr. Cummings, given the amount of new information and changing information this school year especially. So thank you for taking up this work. If anybody has any questions prior to the next meeting, please reach out with your comments or concerns to our policy chair and copy me. Moving on, approval of minutes. Recommend a motion that the Board of Education approve the minutes from January 19th, 2021, 6:30 special meeting and January 26th, 2021 special meeting. Can I have a motion? Mrs. Gerber, seconded by Mr. Peterson. Any questions or comments on the minutes? Seeing none, take to the board for a vote. All in favor? Motion carries 9-0. Superintendents report. Mr. Cummings?
All right. Again, good evening, everyone. I'm going to talk about a couple things tonight. I have 3 items to discuss. 2 of them are on the agenda, and 1 of them is a pleasant surprise late addition. So let me start talking first about the remote learning day and provide an update on that, which took place on February 2nd. I just kind of wanted to walk people through the process of this and how we made a determination of that remote learning day on February 2, as well as, and I recognize in advance that this might also raise board member questions about the calls, the weather-related calls over the last couple of days. So I'll get through the conversation about the second and then entertain any questions about, happy to respond to any questions about the snow day calls at both that last week and this week. So, you know, again, I think it's always important to remember that not only are we reviewing when we're making a weather-related call, we're making that that decision in light of all the context that we take into that call. So it's obviously the weather, it's the implications for safety, but in a year prior to this year, I've always tried to consider what might be coming up. Are students going to be out for an extended period of time? Like they are, you know, this weekend. What else might be going on in the schools? We've had to deal with SAT days and things like that. These are all kinds of considerations that go in to determining remote learning day or trying to get students in person or saying that it has to be a snow day. Certainly, this year is the opportunity, I'll call it an opportunity, to call remote learning days has added another piece to this because, as we've talked about in the past with board members, and at board conversations, the issues around power and internet accessibility bring other concerns to the front and into this conversation. So, and that certainly played a part on the decision for both for February 2nd. So as we recall, we did have a snow day on Monday, February 1st. We knew that on that afternoon that we was going to be unlikely that we would be able to have school in session on February 2nd, given the amount of snow that fell on the 1st. So we made a call that afternoon that we were going to have a remote learning day. But we finished the day saying we're going to examine this decision first thing in the morning in light of potential issues that came overnight, such as power or internet outages. And we at the end of the day, when I was aware that there was some potential internet outages out along Stratfield Road. And that's pretty much the extent of what we knew. That was kind of amorphous understanding that there were some internet outages along Stratfield Road. So on the morning of the 2nd, around, I guess it was 4:30 or so, Mr. Papa George and I were texting back and forth, trying to determine the extent of what those outages were. I was using the outage maps provided by the power companies as well as the internet providers. And then I got some emails overnight from parents and students that said their internet wasn't working. I also saw on one of the internet provider sites that they had restored some internet to parts of Fairfield. That was on their map. So we were comfortable. We were concerned, but comfortable with the decision to continue with the remote learning day, knowing that there might be still some outages, but really in the dark, no pun intended, about how many there actually were. So, of course, once we made the announcement, we started to hear about that there were additional outages, and they were widely scattered throughout town. But again, they were pretty much concentrated along Stratfield Road. So, I'm just looking at my notes here because I did compile some numbers for the board. We did ask parents that if we wanted to make sure that students were given. We're not going to be called in absent or be marked absent if they were not able to access school because of internet or power outages. And we wound up that day having a total of 153 students across the district without internet. So given a district, student population of around 9,500 students, we had 153 without internet access that day. Now, breaking that down a little bit and diving deeper into the situation along Stratfield Road, 50 of those students were at Ward. So a third of the whole group was at Ward. But 19 additional students came from the elementary feeders to Ward as well as Tomlinson. So then the rest again were scattered throughout the district. There were a total of 15 staff members without power or internet, but of course not all those people were confined to Fairfield because there was this kind of scattering of outages across the region. Attendance on that day across the district was 95%. And at Ward, it was 95%, but at Stratfield School itself, it was around 92%. But I think that I'm going to go back, I think there were a total of 12 students total at Stratfield that called in saying they did not have internet access. I will point out that I was made aware that there was some Snapchat activity. I don't know among who or what age group, but that were, and I was given some screenshots, essentially students urging each other to say that they did not have internet access, to let me know that they did not have internet access. And if enough students did that, we would call school that day. It might have been 5. I don't think it was 50. And I say this without judgment, but I think the numbers, particularly at the secondary level, might be a little skewed. Anyway, putting that aside, it did raise a number of questions for us. How can we better gather accurate data ahead of the decision? And what's the best way to do that? Because I will tell you that the outage maps from the utilities, and this is no knock on them, I don't want their job, but it really was not accurate information. At what percentage of students who cannot have access do we say it's got to be a snow day and it can't be a remote learning day? And then, of course, I think the most important question is how do we support students and staff who are not able to access learning and instruction on those days? How do we make sure that we catch up whatever they've missed or support them to fill in any of those gaps? So those are questions that we are working on. But that's essentially what happened that day. And, you know, it's going to be part of our planning next week. I should say the next term. It could be next week. We're not, again, with about 9,500 students, having 153 students total not have internet power or internet or power doesn't say to me that we shouldn't do this, but it does raise good questions. Like I said, I think the question for me is how do we make sure that we better assess what that number might be before the decision's made? And that's something we have to continue to work on and try to come up with a better feedback system than emailing perhaps individuals. So I don't know if the board has any questions about this, or they want to, if there's any questions about the calls over the last couple of days.
Any questions for Mr. Cummings or thoughts just about snow days and the remote learning days? No one? Mr. Cummings, do you know what the absentee rate is similar time like last year, like this 95 and 92% on a normal day? How far off?
We usually track, right now we're and I've been tracking attendance throughout the year, but particularly since early November. We're right around 96, 97% most days. And you know, as I've looked at attendance over the years here, that tends to be the percentage across the district. There will be times, you know, the attendance might dip, for example, a little bit this Thursday, or not this Thursday, tomorrow it could dip. It might dip Tuesday just because of the long weekend. But again, that attendance percentage right now is counting both students actually in school and students accessing school remotely. So the ability to access school remotely is probably actually helping attendance numbers, you know, certainly remain strong. But the district overall has almost a daily average of 95, 96%.
Thank you. Any other questions, thoughts on this? Okay. Seeing none, proceed, Mr. Cummings.
All right, so then I want to talk about the return to school planning and catch people up on where we are. Again, I have a number of notes here that I just want to make sure I hit everything because there's a number of pieces to report tonight. So our building administrators are finalizing their plans and schedules that would allow the full day return of all students on all days. So 100% return of students for the full day is what we're aiming for right now. That's the goal, and that's the work that's happening in the buildings. We have an understanding at the elementary level that we're looking at finalizing the number. If we have a 3-foot distance at lunch, what is the impact on lunch waves? Well, first of all, the first question would be, and again, I want to be really clear on this. This may sound like I'm asking these questions for the first time, but these are the questions we've been looking at and making some final determinations are. Because the 3-foot distance at lunch is a relatively new allowance. So if we can do 3-foot distance at lunch, how many students can fit into the cafeteria, or might it fit into additional large instructional spaces? Like for some, each of the elementary schools has some variability around this, but if say half the gym could be used, how many students might fit into that? Those are all things that the schools are finalizing. So depending on how many students can fit into that would determine how many lunchways would need to take place in the school. And then the potential impact on those lunchways on the existing special schedules. And then as we've talked about through the year, how we're going to supervise that. What staff exists in the building right now who can provide supervision, who might be available for that, and then where would we find additional staff? So looking at potential hires. As the board knows, we've had very little interest in this position since it was posted earlier in the fall. But how do we work through that? And then considering while we fill in that gap, or we try to fill in that gap, the allowance for volunteers and then training volunteers to do this work. As the board knows, I'm really concerned about this idea just because of the fact that it is a volunteer and other things may call on the volunteer's time. but in order to make this work, we're going to have to look at that solution. I mentioned already the impact of the lunch waves on the special schedules and the schedule adjustments, depending on when the schools have been open. They've built lunch waves and built special schedules. We're not using that schedule now on the 4-hour day, but if additional lunch waves are necessary, it may impact where some of those specialists are slotted. As we've talked about, or maybe I shouldn't say, what maybe new information here is that the barriers that are in the classrooms right now are causing issues for instruction, especially, I think, particularly among our youngest students. They create sound issues, or students have trouble hearing each other and hearing the teacher. And also because of the visual field, they can interfere with seeing the board or seeing others. But after speaking with the health department, and Ms. Mitchell's advice is that we should continue to use those for snack breaks in the classroom when students don't have masks on, for mask breaks that take place in the classroom, and then they will also be needed for lunch. And that's a similar expectation for the use of those barriers at the secondary level when we get to that. So the barriers are going to have a role going forward as an additional mitigation factor. At the high school, we're at a point we're really waiting for further guidance, and kind of jumping ahead here a bit, but from what our understanding is, the CDC will be releasing a new or updated guidance tomorrow. We don't know exactly what is in that guidance, but we're hopeful that there'll be some further clarification of distancing, particularly for students in the middle and high school levels. And if those clarifications allow for closer distances at lunch, can we bring students back at the secondary level for lunch at distances less than 6 feet apart? Is the scientific evidence supporting that at this point? So that's one of the things we're waiting to hear about tomorrow. So we have to look at, for the secondary level, 6-12, we have kind of a fork in the road that we're approaching, whether we plan for a 6-foot distance at lunch or a 3-foot distance at lunch. In either case, we're going to have to make adjustments potentially to the schedule, getting the number of students into the cafeteria spaces or in the auxiliary gym spaces. At a shorter distance would, of course, allow more students into those places. But if we have to maintain the 6-foot, we're going to probably need additional lunch waves during the day, which will impact the length of some of the periods. And these are, again, the things that the principals are working through. If we're able to do shorter distances, can we put students back at the tables? Can we use the tables and then free the desks to go back to the classrooms? One of the things that's kind of out there at all levels is consideration when the tents can be returned and put back up. I'm glad they're not up now, but we're going to have to hopefully look for late March, I think, for consideration to get those out, because that will be a relief valve for some of the spacing issues that we face, no matter what we're doing. Let's see, and then we have to look at the impact in classrooms and hallways for the distance of 3 feet apart, what that's going to look like, how that might be handled. As we've talked about, and if you've been in our high schools and middle schools, you know there's a variety of classroom sizes. Some of those classrooms will more easily handle that distance, others are going to struggle. So that's one of the things we have to look at. And again, the barriers will be needed if we're able to keep the students in school for lunch at secondary, using the barriers at lunch and helping them, the students use the same barrier and potentially use it in the classrooms. I know that some districts, well, even going back to fall, we were aware that when we made the decision to purchase the barriers, that was based on the experience that other districts are having using them and finding success with them. So while it's not worked out so well in our elementary schools, we will look at this for the secondary level as well and see if it helps alleviate or serve as an additional mitigation strategy in classrooms as well as in the lunchroom. Just a couple other things around this, and then we can go to questions. But we were hoping to start athletics tonight, but the weather interfered with that as well. So the those games are being made up tomorrow. We are going to be reviewing the parent attendance guidelines this week. It actually came quicker than I thought it would, and thankfully it did. we'll be reviewing the parents' attendance guidance this week. And if we can work with the health department, and as soon as those changes are approved, we'll be able to start offering some decisions around parent attendance at athletic games, contests, hopefully very soon. I want to just take a moment and thank our athletic directors. They've done a lot of work preparing for this. A lot of thought has gone into their not only the preseason for the students and the practicing, but in anticipation of games. They've done an awful lot of work, and I just want to thank them both for that. Before and after school activities are going to be beginning soon. Activity and club advisors, we've asked activity and club advisors to meet with their principals to review the mitigation strategies that they're going to use before starting in-person activities. So essentially the timeline on that is for the advisor or the activity leader to have a meeting with their principal, just make sure that everything is, the principal approves what they're doing. This would include before school music lessons in the elementary level, for example. And Mr. Mancusi, finally on this, Mr. Mancusi is working with the special education supervisors and the building administrators to bring back all the 612 identified, special ed identified, and 504 students back to school 5 days a week. So that is in process. That a lot of that work has already been done, but we're going to get everybody back as quickly as possible. And just a couple of updates from DPH this morning. As I said already, there's an expectation that we're going to get revised CDC guidance tomorrow. What's exactly in that, we do not know, but we have gotten some information that there may be further guidance around mask use. And the idea essentially being, or especially being that there's some anticipation that the CDC will be saying that we should be wearing 2 masks. And again, we should know more about that tomorrow, but some of that seems to be in response to the concerns around the variants that are happening in different parts of the world right now and have started to show up in the United States. But one of the superintendents, I believe it was the superintendent, if not, it was a community health director, asked on the phone call today what about the spread of the variants and the possibility of increased numbers, and the guidance we got from DPH, was essentially what we've heard from them all on, that we need to approach this 1 week at a time. There is some concern about what March might bring, given some of the projections around increases in numbers and the variants. But none of this is confirmed at this point. It's just a concern, and that's essentially why they're saying for us to take it 1 week at a time. So finally, I want to just say that we'll be working. I'll be working with the board leadership in the next couple of weeks to select a special meeting date to happen hopefully very soon, hopefully in the next 3 weeks, to talk about schedule plans for the remainder of the year. My hope is that we can do that. We can have that meeting within the next 3 weeks, and we can detail how this is all going to play out and how we're going to make it work. So for questions. And then if I forget, I apologize. If I forget, there's one other, as I said, there's one other piece of information I want to make sure I share with the board before my report is done.
Okay, take it to the board for questions. No one? I'm sorry, Ms. Pitko. Floor is yours.
Mr. Cummings, I was just curious, and I apologize for not knowing the answer. Some districts are giving their teachers and staff N95 masks. Is that something we're doing in our district?
No, we're not currently doing that. That's one of the things that we were curious to see will come out of the guidance. I mean, what we've heard so far is that it might be 2 masks. And if one of those is, or would one N95 mask be sufficient for 2 cloth masks? We don't know yet, but if that, we'll follow the guidance, whatever the guidance tells us to do.
Any other questions? Ms. Jacobson.
Hi, Jen Jacobson. Hi, Mr. Cummings. Thank you for the update. When you talked about the activities, is that across all levels, including middle school as well?
It is. It's all levels.
Okay. All right. So we can talk about it in reopening, but we might need to change the document because that's not what it said. So just if
Yeah,
Andrea's on.
that has to be updated.
Okay, all right, thanks. And then I know that we had a follow-up from Mr. Mancusi about middle school and high school SPED students or 5 IEPs, with IEPs being able to come in 5 days a week, and you did mention that. So I just wanted to know if we could have a better idea of when they would all be offered that.
Sure. Mr. McCusey, could you speak to that?
Yes, I can. Good evening, everybody. Rob Mancusi, Executive Director of Special Education and Special Programs. We've communicated with, obviously, we speak daily with our special ed coordinators. We've communicated with building administration. We've set a target date of March 1st to return all students with IEPs and 504 plans. Our target date is March 1st with 504 plans and IEPs. Just to give the board a quick update, because this has been an ongoing effort since the beginning to increase in-person learning opportunities for primarily students with disabilities with IEPs since day one. All of our CLC students and all students in our specialized social emotional behavioral programs have been offered full-time in-person learning since the opening of school. Since then, obviously the elementary now is back 9 to 1. So all of our students with disabilities with IEPs are now attending, are offered the opportunity to attend 9 to 1 daily. Since the start of the school year, we are now at 105 additional middle school students out of 286, so approximately 37% of our middle school special ed students are now attending school 5 days per week. In addition to that, our middle school CLC students and students in our specialized social emotional program at the middle school level have been offered in-person learning since school opening. At the high school level, between the two high schools, in addition to obviously the CLC students who have been offered in-person learning since school opening, our impact students now have been offered 5 days in-person learning at both high schools, and an additional non-CLC students, an additional 117 students at both high schools, and that includes some 504 students, are now attending in-person learning 5 days per week. But our goal, and I think it's a lofty goal, but I think we can do it because we believe in it, is that all students with disabilities, defined as students with IEPs and 504 plans, be offered to return to school in person 5 days per week, effective March 1st.
Okay, thank you for that information and update. That's good to hear.
Ms. Jacobson, can I just ask a follow-up to that question? Would you mind?
Yeah, go ahead.
Mr. Mancusi, in just having these conversations with families, are you finding that some families are choosing to stay remote either due to health concerns? Just for these numbers, I want to just be kind of clear on that that's still something that we are offering students, and there's still a need and a desire for some families to have that remote option?
Thank you for asking that question. Yes, those numbers reflect the number of students who are currently back. It doesn't reflect, there are several students whose families have chosen to stay remote. So remote learning is working for some families and some students for various reasons, one of them being health conditions. So yes, parents would still have, or students would still have that opportunity to remain remote if they are currently remote.
Thank you. Ms. Jacobson, back to you.
Did that answer your question?
It does. I just when giving these numbers, I just want just to highlight for the public sake and the board's sake that some parents might just opt to not go back full in person for various reasons for what's working for their individual child. It could skew the numbers, just, with personal preference on that. But thank you, Mr. Mancusi, for the answer. Ms. Jacobson, the floor is yours.
Thanks. Okay, and so now that we have that group sort of situated, what I would like to move on to is a group that is not 504 and IEP. So other at-risk students and some of our other subgroup populations. that are, I'll just say, at risk at this point? And are we offering them or looking to offer them in an expeditious manner the same opportunity?
We are. The other group that we're really concentrating on is EL students. I was not able to make contact with Dr. Swingler today around that work, but I know that they've been able to bring back at the secondary level in 612 quite a number of EL students. I also know that at the elementary level, they're working to do that as well. So that's an ongoing effort, but I apologize. I don't have numbers right now for you tonight because, again, I wasn't able to connect with them.
No, that's okay. I understand. I just want to make sure that just because someone doesn't have an IEP or a 504 doesn't mean that they're not in need of additional supports that we should be offering to them. So, yep, understood. And of course, to Ms. Vitale's point, the same holds for any person that if that's not what they want to do. The point is that we're making the option available. So,
Yes.
Thank you for addressing that. And no, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Asa?
Yes, thank you. Just two quick questions. One, Mr. Cummings, with regard to you mentioned the 3-foot distance at lunch. We're waiting on guidance on that. But with regard to our immediate surrounding districts that have been able to bring back more students at the secondary level, do we know if they are doing more lunch waves, or are they just making their own decision to go with that 3-foot distance?
They're, I think, working on a 3-foot distance. They're making their own decisions around that. They're also, from what our understanding is, they're using classroom spaces. I think a number of our districts are better positioned with staff in the building that they can use as supervisory. If you think about even at any level, if you're going to start using classrooms, which, our current food allergy policy does not allow, because it does raise a lot of concerns around supervision, proper supervision of students. I was at one of our middle schools today, for example, and we were just kind of enumerating possible spaces, but with every space, there's at least one teacher or one staff member, if not two. It just adds up really quickly, and we don't have those people necessarily to take away from other responsibilities to put them watching lunch.
Okay, so are we, just to be clear, are we communicating with some of these other districts just to learn, positives and, pros and cons as to what they've learned since they've been in and we haven't?
Yeah, that's a constant. Quite a number of our principals have contacts in other districts, but I meet weekly with the area superintendents, and this is usually a Friday conversation topic.
Okay, I do have another question, but I see Mrs. Jacobson's hand if she has a follow-up to that specific.
Ms. Jacobson? Follow-up?
I do, Mr. Asa, thank you. Just piggybacking on that, and just for benefit of the public and for the board, I guess, and in those communications with other districts that have brought in more students and are eating lunch in school, has there been any serious uptick in cases with students or staff pertaining to that move?
Not that I'm aware of. As we've seen here, when the students are closer together, when a case does develop, you're gonna have more students in quarantine. I'm only aware of a couple of cases in the region that have possibly been linked to in-school transmission, but they're not linked specifically to a lunch case, a lunchroom issue.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, Mr. Issa, thank you.
No, absolutely. And then my second question, and I apologize, I have not had a chance to review the reopening committee's meeting from yesterday. But was there anything noteworthy to share outside of what you've covered in a pretty broad context here of everything you guys are working on? Was there anything fruitful that came from that we want to share here so the public's aware?
I don't know. There's members of the committee on this call besides me, but I think for essentially what I provided tonight was probably more information than even I have with the reopening committee, because there's a couple other pieces I was able to add today, for example. So I would defer to others on the committee, Dr. Parrish, and board members.
Thank you.
Dr. Parrish, we'll give you the floor first, and then we'll take it to the board.
Thank you. Zakia Parrish, Executive Director of Operations and Processes. Most of the conversation centered around the Wednesday schedule and the access or participation rates rather of students during that after school 2 hour of student support time, and some conversations around what might be some alternatives to the current schedule that we are utilizing at the secondary level. There was also a lot of conversation, which we've already gone through just now, in reference to some of our special populations and the number of students that have been brought back in each of those populations, recommendations around trying to increase that number. And then there was some additional conversation just in reference to the reopening plan itself, and the need to be more specific in terms of the plans around what lunch looks like, understanding that there'll be a general explanation in the body of the plan itself, but that there will be more school-specific plans just based on some of the things that differ from one building to the next in terms of spaces and number of students and things like that that would have to go into the appendix of that document.
Thank you, Dr. Parrish. Mr. Otelli, followed by Ms. Guernsey.
Thank you, Bonnie Rotelli. One of the best things that I heard yesterday at the reopening committee meeting was when Ms. Mitchell discussed the whole class quarantines and the results that came out of the elementary school. I think yesterday it was 6, but it's been a total of 8, I believe, that have now come
7.
off.
Yeah.
7 have come off their quarantines, and not one positive case from all of those whole class quarantines has resulted in anything. So I think when we think about the fact that we've successfully brought back our elementary school students at full capacity, and we haven't seen the spread, that's fantastic news going forward for us. And and I do, as we have these conversations, and I'm excited to have that meeting, Mr. Cummings, to hopefully get some dates down, hopefully sooner than later. And we approach the thought of having kids go back full-time. I was looking on the CSDE's website today and looking at their state report by model and noticing the numbers of positive cases by in-person, by hybrid, and by remote. And thank you to Ms. Jacobson, because compiling all of those numbers over the past 17 weeks of data that we've been able to accumulate now, it is in-person has the least amount of positive cases by far, with even remote students reporting more positive cases than in-person. So it's just worth noting as we look at the data and we're moving forward, that these are the types of things that we're looking at and are encouraging for us getting our kids back in school.
Ms. Rotelli, I appreciate you bringing that up, and I don't want to by any means discourage I don't want to say that's not encouraging news. But that somebody actually raised that question today on the DPH call, and one of the epidemiologists said that at this point they're not confident of the statistical reliability of some of those numbers because of a lot of other factors. So by no means do I want to say it's not encouraging, because it certainly points in the right direction, but they were hesitant at this point still to cite it as evidence for one model over the other, and that was from the state. So I only issue that as a caution, not as a discouragement.
Sure, and I understand all the concerns, and anecdotally speaking, I can say this morning I was having a conversation with Ms. Mitchell, and I was also encouraged because of I think it was up to 470 positive cases just for the public schools alone. There's only been 3 potential in-school transmissions of those 470 cases. Sure. Which is pretty amazing. And kudos go to our contact tracing team and the school nurses and all of the staff at the schools and the job that they're doing to keep everybody safe.
Thank you for bringing that up, because I think that you know, those three cases have gotten a lot of negative publicity, and we can understand it. But you're
Yeah.
right, in the larger context of things,
Yeah.
you know, this has truly been a remarkable community effort.
Right.
We hear when somebody goes to school sick, we hear about it, and rightfully so. But there's an awful lot of kids and staff staying home, following the guidance, and doing the right thing to protect each other. And that's not, almost in some ways, that's not a measurable statistic.
Right.
But clearly, as you point out, that's quite a remarkable accomplishment.
Yes.
Thank you, Ms. Rotelli. And yes, and kudos to our staff and our teachers for, I mean, I think that we should definitely celebrate that the safety mitigations that we do have in place are working, which are important. And when we look at other districts that, you know, from having to take full districts remote for weeks at a time, that we have not had to do that this year. And that is a testament, I think, to everyone in our community. Ms. Guernsey, the floor is yours, followed by Mrs. Maxon-Cannelli.
Thanks so much, Carol Guernsey. And as a member of the reopening committee, I just wanted to add that I was actually I was pretty disappointed that we couldn't continue the conversation about how to improve the current hybrid model. You know, without having a timeline for reopening and really seeing a full plan for what that looks like. It's just hard for me to abandon that hope that we can make improvements to it, especially for our high school students and middle school students. And specifically, you know, my concerns are about that Wednesday schedule. And I just wanted to reiterate that here, that that's an immediate change that we could make that our students would really benefit from. And it's something that, you know, apparently now we are not able to focus on because the focus has switched to reopening. And my concern about reopening lies with you know, the mitigation strategies that I think we need to discuss further about lunch. And then also I'm concerned about the type of quarantines that would impact the students at the high school and middle school level, specifically the high school level. So I think there's a lot of work to do, and I'm grateful for, you know, all the people that are putting time and effort into making this plan. But I do have concerns because of the lack of timeline and you know, our sort of veering off course of continuing this discussion about how we can improve the hybrid model, which is working really well for so many families and may continue for an extended period of time, or at least a period of time that is undetermined. So those were my thoughts at the reopening committee meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Guernsey. Mrs. Maxon-Cannelli?
Thank you. And actually, my first question through the chair to Mrs. Rotelli, I was wondering when Mrs. Mitchell was talking, or when the conversation was happening regarding those students in quarantine and that none of them tested positive, did she by any chance provide you with any data for how many of them were tested? Like, do we know that as a number or any, even a ballpark?
I don't know that information.
Okay. Sort of to Mrs. Guernsey's point, it's, I mean, nothing we can do if we don't have the data, but if a lot of kids were being tested and also not coming up positive and therefore being able to come back to school. But okay, a few other questions. Mr. Cummings, you referenced the tents, and I was just wondering how quickly can we confirm that they're going to be available at all of our schools, and are they all being planned to be situated to help with lunch, or are they more just for outdoor options?
It really depends on the size. The school sites that can support the larger tent, like the ones we saw, for example, at both Ward and Roger Ludlow, those would be able to accommodate students for lunch. Some of the other tents really served almost as a mass break area, a smaller area. You can't put too many students under those. So it really is site specific as to the size of the tent that can go out. The other issue that we have to look at is will be weather related, and getting those, you know, once we kind of get clearance on what the ground is going to look like and we're past the danger of significant snow, getting those back up. But since the town did purchase those, we're not relying on anybody other than some crews to go out and put them back into place. So hopefully as soon as possible.
Okay. And then secondly, when it comes to making these lunch plans, which obviously we're still waiting to hear specifics on, my hope would be at the secondary level that we are not limiting ourselves to the auxiliary locations. In fact, if we can, because of limited staff coverage, if we can make better use of a full gym, have much more space, and therefore not have to have staff in 2 locations, I sincerely hope that would be considered, because I do believe, and I think the will is there, that getting them all back at this point is the greater priority, and therefore, if we have to commandeer the large gym space, I would hope that would be the direction that. Again, obviously, that's not what I'm hoping for, but I hope that that is remaining on the table as an option to get the. And if it's taking up a full gym in elementary school as well, because having a bigger space is obviously a more efficient allocation of staff and their supervisory. So I hope that's staying on the table, because certainly for grades K through 8, we have fulfilled a state statute requirement of having offered PE. Not that we can't do more as a remote option, because we had last March through June as a model for that. And then for the high school, again, not ideal, but soon enough there's going to be an outdoor option. And likewise, we fulfilled a graduation requirement entirely with asynchronous remote instruction in the spring. So I'll just putting. I mean, if you have anything to say, of course you can. But I'm just putting out there that I hope that remains as an option if it helps to get us back full in.
Ms. Mexican, I think for all levels, and you know, some of this is going to be not only level specific, but certainly building specific. We have to look at the pros and cons of all options. We have to put everything on the table and examine it and make the best decisions around because the whole year has been about trying to find the balance and the pluses and minuses, right? And so this will be just further carried forward as we look at these plans and making them specific.
Thank you. Further, I'd also like to echo Mrs. Guernsey's concern about those Wednesdays, that I do wish that the part-time offering in the secondary would not wait on any full reopening timeline, which can hit all sorts of bumps along the way, worsening numbers or anything like that. But just throwing that out there. I was wondering if there's been a thought to what if there is an inequity in the numbers of volunteers stepping up. If in fact, especially at the elementary school level, if we start relying on volunteers to be able to staff them, I would bet that some of the elementary schools would have parents more likely to be in a position to step up. And so what do we do about that?
Yeah, that you're right. And I think that's where we go back to the idea of trying to hire, and we can reemphasize this push, but hiring lunch aides at a district level and then distributing where the needs exist, not to the building level.
But you have been trying to hire and not meeting success, right. Correct?
Right. We have about 3 total applicants at this point.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Secondly, probably fifthly at this point. In the past, there's been an issue with the CDC issuing a guideline, and that doesn't actually immediately impact us. That has to percolate to the state, that has to percolate to the local, that then percolates to the district. So while initially it's exciting to hear that the CDC might issue new guidelines tomorrow, what actually is the turnaround time for a district being able to take action on that?
Well, it would depend, I think, on the guidelines. So for example, if you look at something like if the mask guidance were a change, and again, I just based this on the conversation this morning with the DPH, you know, they would revise, I think it's addendum 5 or 4 around the mask guidance. They would revise that in light of the new, but districts wouldn't necessarily need to wait to make that change, right? If the CDC is saying we should be doubling up the masks, then we can start to talk about doubling up the masks and figuring out what we have to do. I think that I don't want to speak certainly for them, but I think in conversations with our town health officials, they look to the CDC for guidance and helping them make some determinations in providing us with guidance. So I don't think we're necessarily. Somebody explained this morning. One of the epidemiologists talked about it, gave an example of essentially the CDC issues guidance around travel advisories. The governor institutes it with an executive action. the CDC guidance has no binding authority, but the governor does through his executive actions. So we're not necessarily dependent on a state authority issuing guidance around that type of thing.
Mrs. Maxicanelli, you're muted again.
I apologize. Someone's phone, not mine, was going off. Sorry about that. Thank you. And just two last questions. First of all, I'm delighted to hear about pulling more of these students back, and that was for that March 1st deadline that Mr. Mancusi spoke to. As always, I'm just curious about why the delay. As they are already identified students, I don't understand a 3-week delay in trying to pull them back.
There we go. I would have Mr. Mancusi speak to that, but I just want to say I think some of the concerns that our principals have right now is on maintaining some of the distancing in some of the classes.
Yeah,
so I think that's something that we have to work through. I don't know, Rob, if you want to speak to it further.
Yeah, Rob Mancusi, Executive Director of Special Education. Good question. It's really getting together with the schools and the administrators and the teams to discuss the logistics of how to make this happen safely.
Okay. All right. Thank you. And never mind. I'll leave that for separate. Last question is regarding the athletics, and because I guess I'm just asking about the power of the FCAC on this, in that districts seem to have a lot of freedom to make their own decisions based on their own facilities. And I guess I don't quite understand why athletics are different. In other words, our gym and the space that we offer is not the same as necessarily other facilities. Ours might be larger. We have definitely potential for more spacing, have a greater staff commitment to policing that spacing, as an example. So I guess I'm unclear on why we're having to abide by a league rule on that, and we don't have the same district specific freedom on that to make the decisions. You know, as an example, obviously we have indoor capacity indicated by executive action, you know, in terms of executive orders of indoor recreation having 50, 100 person limits. Why are we abiding by such a strict and significantly lower number? And that's a process I'm unclear on.
The origins of those numbers have come from conversations between DPH and the CIAC. And I think the FCAC is following at this point the direction of the CIAC. I'm only aware at this point that to date that the FCAC is looking at making some changes. I don't know if I haven't had a chance to find out if that originated with the CIAC. I've not seen any communication from CIAC, nor did DPH mention any changes on their call this morning. So I think that, I do know that, for example, SEC in Southern New Haven County, they were allowing some fan attendance. They had made a league decision, knowing those gyms somewhat. They tend to be smaller than a lot of the Fairfield County gyms. So to your point, I think that there has to be, each district may have some variance depending on its sizes. Its ability to maintain safe distancing and the number of students that would be involved. We're talking about relatively small team rosters. And I think that what the leagues try to do in general, and this is not a specific statement to FCAC's approach right now, but in general, what the leagues have tried to do is promote some parity of expectations across the schools. So, home team only, some decision, would it just be senior parents or not? In the fall, volleyball had, I think, a maximum capacity of 25 home fans for each contest that could be appropriately spaced apart. As a lot of things have happened since the fall, people have learned a lot, and that number may actually start to increase. Especially given, even as even variance in between our two gyms, high school gyms. The sizes somewhat considerable when you think about having to restrict the number of people who can come in. So those are just things that we're kind of waiting for further guidance on.
But just so I'm clear, it's not that we're voluntarily, it's the league actually dictates this, that unlike other school educational decisions with regard to it, I mean, again, I'm looking ahead at something like the February 22nd Ludlow Ward matchups of basketball, and how wonderful if we could open that up to some seniors to go and watch. And I'm just clarifying, though, that Fairfield Public Schools, it's not just a courtesy. We don't have a choice, or, I mean, do we have to abide by these FCAC decisions? Or could we say, we know our space, we know they're big, we can police them, we can, etc. We have any latitude to make our own decision?
I don't know if I can answer that yet because I'm not sure what specific. All I heard today was that the FCAC had opened up this possibility. I don't know what guidance. I can't react to your question because I don't know what guidance they've given that I'd be reacting to. If that makes sense. I'm not sure what they've said or not said. I don't know if, for example, and this is just a open-ended question, but I don't know if they said 2 parents per senior or they said X number of people per square foot. That would be a variance that would potentially allow for differences among districts, right? So I'm not aware yet of what that might look like.
And I'm done, but is there a way that, or can you direct me where to follow up on that? Or can someone follow up and get back to me? If
we
you
can get back to the
me on
board. We should have more information tomorrow. We can get back to the board.
Thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions for the superintendent about reopening? Just for the public's knowledge, in terms of looking at spaces, some other things that have to be taken into consideration. I remember over the summer talking about the fire marshal giving clearance on some things. What is the procedure? Mr. Papageorge, this might be through the superintendent to you, in terms of getting, things, additional spaces signed off on. Is there anything that we need to be cognizant of, or do we really have a lot of latitude?
So yeah, we did meet with the fire marshal over the summer, and we did look at some sites. I believe there is latitude there. We would have to take it on a case by case and bring them out to look at it, but they're willing to work with us and help us out wherever they can.
Thank you. And then just one more question, not being an elementary school parent or seeing these barriers, how easy is it for them to take them up and down? And this is really just more curiosity than anything else. If they're going to be used for snack breaks, will the students be putting them on the tables, or will they need staff assistance for that?
Would you like me to answer, Mr. Cummings?
Yeah, I was going to say, I don't know if Angelos is going to answer, but certainly, yeah, if you can answer, Dr. Zavichansik.
So I think it depends on the grade level. Obviously, our kindergartners will have more trouble than our 5th graders. They're fairly light. For the most part, they are able to go up and down. The ones in the elementary schools don't have the handles, and they take them up and down now for the most part. When they fall off, they're not secured to the desk, so it is possible. But again, there might be more accommodations needed for our at least K-1 students, with help from the teacher.
Okay, thank you. All right, before Mr. Cummings gives us the, Ms. Jacobson, sorry, go ahead.
Sorry. Just to the chair, Mrs. Vitale, just a quick question, just so everyone's perfectly clear, because it sounds like now, there's things that still need to be worked out. And Mr. Cummings, and either one of you can answer this question, obviously. Sometime in the next 3 weeks, there's going to be a special meeting where all of these things that haven't been hashed out will have been hashed out, and we will have timelines. Is that accurate statement?
Yeah, that is absolutely our intent.
Ooh.
Yes. And
okay, thank you.
Even, I was going to bring this up later in the meeting, I was looking to just hold a special meeting this month to just get a little update on the district improvement plan, maybe just, next steps for that. Now that we're past the approval of the budget, maybe we can piggyback both of these items on one agenda later in the month. So I will be polling the board for availability in the next couple of days so we can try to get a date on the calendar after the February break. And hopefully we'll have, more guidance from the CDC, to Mr. Cummings' point that, we do need to just take it, short periods, build a timeline, but also be reacting to new information that we receive. I'm hopeful, the COVID numbers have been trending in the right direction. And I hope that we continue to see that positive trend downward. And it'll give me just more confidence that we can move these plans forward sooner rather than later. I do have concerns about, going less than the 6 feet in certain areas. So I would more confident at elementary school, secondary and middle school. I would just really ask staff to look at other scenarios to potentially bring back more students in a somewhat hybrid model if that becomes necessary. I'm not looking, I appreciate that every plan requires time being taken away from something else, but I know that we had talked about, I guess last month, bringing 60% back, 70% back, 80% back. To Ms. Maxine Kennelly and Ms. Guernsey's comments about Wednesday, that any additional time that we can try to work in safely, I think that we should try to do that while still keeping our eye on the end game, which is, of course, to bring everybody safely back into the building. So I thank the staff for their work on that. I thank my fellow board members for the reopening, who are on the reopening committee. I was not able to make that meeting yesterday, and appreciate the discussion and look forward to getting an update after the break later in the month. So any questions, last comments, questions on this item? Seeing none, Mr. Cummings, back to you.
Okay, thank you. Last item, I just want to say today, the town of Fairfield closed on the Giant Steps property, which will be our future home of the Walter Fitzgerald campus. So I want to thank again, First Selectwoman Kopchak, all of her staff, town attorney, Mr. Baldwin, for his work on this. Certainly the members of the Board of Selectmen, the Board of Finance, and the RTM. And of course, a great thanks to our Board of Education and their advocacy for this project from the very beginning. And finally, Mr. Papageorge and Mr. Mancusi, who just did so much to make this work and to make it happen. Mr. Papageorge had the keys in his hand when I saw him earlier this evening. So we'll go forward now with determining next steps. We want to get the Walter Fitzgerald staff over there to have a look at the building, to get a sense of what the possibilities are for their program. I also want to get the district leadership team over there to get a sense of what this does ultimately for the district as a whole, and then we can certainly discuss further. Even as an example, at our March meeting, we intend to have a conversation about the Literacy Academy and whether that exists at Walter Fitzgerald next year or in the future. Just again, what other possibilities exist for that school property. So, thank you to everyone and congratulations.
That is definitely good news. And I echo the thanks to all the town officials who worked together to make that happen. It's an exciting prospect for our district. Thank you, Mr. Papageorge and Mr. Mancusi, for just leading the way on this. I'm excited for those students and for just the possibilities that site offers for us. And one more question for Mr. Papageorge, and if you don't have the answer, you can follow up with me afterwards. Furniture in that building, is there anything that as we're talking about setting up alternative spaces this school year, is there anything in that building that maybe we can borrow for the next few months?
Absolutely. Actually, we looked at the furniture before we even closed on the property. We had worked out a deal with the current owners that we could borrow any of the furniture in there. So it's still in the back of our heads, and as buildings request different types of furniture, we know there's a resource there.
That's great news. Thank you. Any other questions for the superintendent? Okay. Seeing none, moving on to committee and liaison reports. Ms. Rotelli, followed by Mr. Peterson.
Yeah, so SEPTA is having their next meeting on February 24th at 7:30. Our own middle school SPED coordinator, John Goodison, will be presenting and discussing Fairfield's transition to standards-based IEP development, including a parent Q&A session. So everyone feel free to log on to fairfieldsepta.org, join, get the link. It'll be a fun meeting.
Thank you, Ms. Rotelli. Mr. Peterson.
Hi, thanks. I have an unusually large set of things to update you guys about. I want to, since we were just talking with Mr. Papa George here, I want to thank him again for his performance at last week's Board of Finance meeting, where he very ably presented our new waterfall. There were not many questions, although some of the ones that we did get some questions about the Jennings Dwight swap, which was not surprising. Some questions about the expense related to building management systems and their utility and going forward, which I think Mr. Papa George was very ably defended the district's interest there. So I wanted to say thanks for that. I actually have a Holland Hill Building Committee update, which is interesting. Last week there was a meeting to close out one of their final invoices, but there had been some questions about the project. Specifically, the field came up. Some discussion about the field, whether the drainage was appropriate, whether the field conforms to the standards that were expected. And it's difficult to evaluate that now given the weather, but it was decided at that meeting to hold off on paying that final invoice until we got a clear answer on that. And there were also some issues with some defective lighting sensors. So they had I think they said a 12% failure rate for lighting sensors that were installed. So they're working with contractors to replace them all. That was an unacceptable level of failure. And just last of all, Finance and Budget Committee, we met last week. Some of the stuff we've already talked about in other communications, but one of the things that I did want to talk about was Mr. Cummings' discussion we had with the committee about possible changes to the budget process, specifically whether or not it should start earlier. Kind of involve the board earlier, push things back so we have additional time for the debates, which obviously can be lengthy and detailed, as you all know. So Mr. Cummings was going to come back to us at next month's meeting with some specific ideas, but I just want to let you know that that was a thing that we were starting to talk about.
Thank you, Mr. Peterson. Ms. Jacobson.
I don't have a huge update, but just, everyone's aware things are heating up in Hartford at this time. Public hearings are starting. I'll be sure to still, update everyone with proposals that impact or could possibly impact the district or students or staff. So, but if you have any questions as we move through the process, please, please reach out to me. Thanks.
Thank you. Mrs. Gerber.
Earlier this evening, I listened in on a remarkably speedy Mill Hill Building Committee meeting. Mr. Quinn was in peak form, but he did, in the brief period of time that the meeting took place, there were discussions about the fact that things are still moving along well. And I heard something about pictures being taken that were sent to Mr. Quinn. So I've requested getting them so I can share them with the rest of the board. But everyone sounds very enthusiastic that things are moving in the right direction, that they're on schedule, and we'll just knock wood that it will continue that way.
Thank you, Mrs. Gerber. And Mrs. Maxcanelli, did you have your hand up? Mrs. Maxcanelli?
Yes. First I had, yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. First I actually had a question through Mrs. Jacobs, how on the bill you were providing testimony for? Like, what was it? What were you on the side of people mostly in favors? How did the tenor of the conversation go?
I think that the tenor of the conversation is a pretty broad understanding of the need to move forward. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Sorry. Okay. Sorry. It looked like everyone started spinning. So yeah, there's a broad understanding that there's a need to move forward. However, as drafted, I think there needs to be a lot more thoughtful approach to the language that is underlying that bill, and take into consideration different size of districts and timelines and phased approaches. So meanwhile, while doing so without causing daily chaos to districts. And obviously, I did, of course, mention funding for it. So, and that is going to be a need. So I hope I did everyone proud, but yes, that was how it went.
Any additional questions about the bill and Ms. Jacobs' testimony?
I want to speak to two policies that we will likely have coming up. The first is attendance. That we may need to, and I'm just trying to alert the board in case this ends up being another one and done policy that full remote day, that might be something that we are bringing back to the full board again. And then secondly, that we also might need to take action quickly, and this I'm sure would get generated food allergy policy. And so just wanted to alert the board that those might be coming back again.
Thank you, Mrs. Maxicanelli. Any other committee reports? I will report the Board of Health met last night. The town is moving forward with just the vaccination program being very successful. Supply is getting to be more of a challenge as more facilities are being able to vaccinate, CVS, Walmart, but the health department continues to advocate. 65 and older are now in the VAM, so if you know anybody, a neighbor who might need help accessing, getting registered, they should reach out to the Department of Health. Sands and Jill also just gave an update on what's going on with the schools, and we shared that information already in the superintendent's report, so I won't repeat that. The Board of Health just also is asking the board to be cognizant of considering the mental health concerns of our students as we identify our back to school plans and just programming for extracurriculars as well. And that is really it for them right now. Any questions? Okay, seeing none, we'll take it to open board comment. Seeing none, I will just like to take a moment to thank the board for their hard work over the last month on the budget. It was a long process, and I look forward to that portion of it being behind us so we can together can work on moving this district forward. I'm looking forward to talking about the next district improvement plan. I apologize to the staff that stayed with us. The meeting went longer than expected. That 5-minute recess that we took ended up being a little bit longer, and I appreciate your sticking with us. I again want to thank you for all of your hard work on that budget. It did not go unnoticed. You were very receptive to all of our questions, and just want you to know how much you appreciate it. I look forward to, just to moving forward together and focusing on all of the good things that we do together. And with that, if anybody else has anything else to add, Mrs. Gerber? No? Okay, well, we're not doing motion to adjourn yet. Any public comment? Just please email it to the public comment address if you still have comments to make about agenda items only. And with that, a motion to adjourn. Mrs. Gerber, seconded by Mrs. Jacobson, all in favor. We are adjourned. Thank you.
Good night, everybody.
Good night, everybody. Take
A
care.
short meeting, being that we're going to have another one later in the month.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.